Major breakthroughs, significant progress in the arts, in athletics, in sports, pretty much every gold medal or world championship that's ever been won. There's a flow state at its heart in business. We have to some really compelling data. So McKinsey, the business consultancy, did a 10-year study, and they found that top executives report being 5 times more productive in flow than outflow. It is 500% more productive. They thought it was a spiritual experience. They thought it was a religious experience. It only seemed to show up in that context. Please review the previous videos about the flow state of peak performance, and how it evolved in the previous 2 videos. It's very interesting to watch. You will understand its essence, and how that state is profound in changing history. Please like and subscribe. I do a huge effort to be able to publish the best content. Welcome to the triggers of the flow state. I think the following example will ring a bell with most of you. Like you sit down to write a quickie email, and you look up an hour later, and you realize you've written an essay. You didn't even notice time was passing. Some creative moments is happening. And the writing you did was really high quality. And maybe then suddenly you go back in your body and you're like, oh my god, I really have to go to the bathroom. That is the state of flow. In the following video, I will discuss what is happening inside our mind while in flow, and what is your profile type in flow to be able to work on it. Chick sent me hi, father of flow. When he was running around the world, talking to all these people about this state, during his research all said the same thing: when I'm at my best, when I'm at an expert level of performance, every action, every decision flows seamlessly, effortlessly, perfectly from the last, which is to say flow is a logical description of the experience. Flow is universal. It shows up in anyone anywhere provided certain initial conditions are met. And we're gonna talk about those conditions in a moment. And the last thing Chick Set Me High discovered is probably the most important, is that if you're interested in a life that really means something, if you're interested in overall well-being, total life satisfaction, in his research, the people who scored off the charts for overall well-being, the people who felt they had the most meaningful, powerful lives in the world, these are the people with the most flow in their life. Researchers discovered that you're only using a small portion of your brain during maximum performance, which we used to think before that the more brain capacity used, the more we have performance. It turns out we had it exactly backwards in flow. You're not using more of the brain. You're actually using less of it. We are going to see what is happening for the neurochemical part and neuroelectricity, which is how the brain communicate with the body. Prefrontal cortex is important part of your brain, that's right back here. Now the prefrontal cortex is a really important, really critical, really powerful portion of your brain. This is the part of your brain that takes care of logical, complex decision making. It's where long-term planning hangs out, your sense of morality, your sense of willpower. This is all prefrontal cortex in flow. This portion of the brain is deactivating. Now this has a huge impact on performance, and I'll explain why. So why does time pass so strangely in flow? For example, turns out time is calculated all over the prefrontal cortex. It's sort of a network effect. And as parts of the network start to go down, we can no longer perform this calculation. We lose the ability to separate past from present from future. So when a part of your brain known as the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex shuts down, that's where your inner critic lives. That's the nagging, always on defeatist voice in your head. When you drop into flow, that voice goes silent. We experience this emotionally. It feels like liberation. It feels like freedom. Like we are getting out of our own way, right? So what do we see? Creativity goes up, skyrocket. It's why, 'cause we're no longer doubting every one of our good ideas, risk-taking, 'cause we're no longer so scared, way up as well. Huge impact X on performance. Flow takes you from beta, where you normally are, down to the borderline between alpha and theta. This is incredibly cool and powerful. One of the things that's really significant about it is when you're at this borderline, it's easy to produce a gamma wave. This is a fourth kind of brain wave. And the reason gamma matters, it is the neurological signature of what's known as binding. When a bunch of ideas come together for the first time, and they carve a new pathway into the brain, the signature of the insight moment. The eureka moment, creative ideas just come together. I will define the brain waves involved in a moment for a better insight. Normal life, your brain is in beta. It's producing a beta wave. This is a fast-moving wave. It's where you are right now. It's what's going on in the brain. When you're awake. When you're alert, underneath beta is a slower wave alpha. This is daydreaming mode. This is the maintenance wave for the default mode network. And it's where you can go thought to thought without internal resistance. Right when you're falling asleep, you're in theta. Neurochemistry that shows up in flow and its impact on performance. So when we move into the flow, we get 5 of the most potent neurochemicals. The brain can produce norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, anandamide, and endorphins. Now all these chemicals have a lot of different functions in the brain and the body. We're going to take them one at a time, and we will understand each of these chemicals in action. So norepinephrine and dopamine are both focusing chemicals. These are the brain's principal focusing drugs. So when they're coercing your system, you pay more attention to the task at hand and they're limited, right? So they maximize at about 20 minutes. The brain's major focusing chemicals sort of burn out after about 20 minutes. Serotonin is next. Now serotonin is actually a calming chemical. When it's in your system, you feel calmer and more able to face the challenges at hand. Anandamide is a really interesting neurochemical. It's primarily a painkiller, decrease our sensitivity to pain, but it also amps up lateral thinking. This is the brain's ability to connect ideas together. So it's a really cool form of pattern recognition. Then you've got endorphins. Endorphins are pleasure drugs. They really make us feel good. All of these chemicals actually are pleasure drugs, but endorphins are really powerful. Endorphins are sort of the body's way of telling us that something is rewarding us. Our brain releases them to make us feel good in response to a difficult task, or any time we're really putting out effort during exercise. Motivation is the best place to start. That is increasing performance. What are the chemicals produced in flow and why they say it's an addictive state? Because pleasure drugs. In fact, the 5 most potent reward chemicals the brain can produce in flow appears to be the only time we get all 5 at once. Creativity is one of these words that gets misunderstood all over the place, but it's fundamentally process. It's what happens when the brain takes in novel information, combines it with older ideas, and uses the results to produce something new. The neurochemicals that show up in flow essentially surround the brain's information process. So everything that creativity does, the neurochemicals that show up in flow amplify. So when we're in the state, we take in more information per second, that acquisition goes up. We pay more attention to that information, to that incoming information. So we are silent in that state. We can make faster connections between the upcoming information and older ideas. So pattern recognition increases. We make faster connections between the incoming information and really think outside the box ideas. So what's known as lateral thinking goes up, and because creativity is not so much just about having that neat, great, cool idea. It's also about taking it public. Well, we see risk-taking get increased as well. So the creative process gets surrounded by flow, which is why in studies of how much the impact creativity increase by 400 to 700%. Times the normal in flow state. The other thing that these triggers do sometimes is they lower cognitive load. So we have a working memory, it's very limited. Limited working memory is a problem that many of us face. It is the reason why we forget things. We can remember up to 5 digits, but not 10, why we are more productive with a list of items as opposed to carrying it all in our head. Narrow focus is a problem for many people. We may believe that we have the ability to focus on many different tasks because we can multitask. However, this is not true. Multitasking does not make us more efficient at focusing. Most people tap out in about 4 items, right? So this is known as cognitive load. A lot of these flow triggers will lower cognitive load just a little bit, tiny little bit, but it's enough. Give us a little more focus. And again, focus, drives attention, drives it into the present moment, drives us into flow. So as you're taking the survey, as you're taking this study, you're gonna find that with most questions, you can answer the question one or two ways, answer it the way you lean the most, but just keep the second bit in your mind. You're gonna find you have dropped into one of 4 categories. So the first category that you may find yourself in is a hard charger, a hard charger. These tend to be action. Sport athletes, contact sport athletes. This is somebody who dives in automatically a lot of energy. Lot of flow. The next category you may find self in is what's known as a deep thinker. Deep thinkers are knowledge workers. These are people who find the most flow. They're writers, they're architects, they're coders, they're lawyers, they're doctors, but they find the most flow doing knowledge work, really using your brain, their brains. The next category you may end up in is a flow goer. Now these are people who we know most typically associate with flow yoga fanatics, for example, people who are really immersed in spiritual conditions, who have meditative practices, very flowy lifestyles. This is the flow goer. And so the last category is a crowd pleaser. This means you're an outgoing person. You find the most flow when you're giving a presentation, where you're leading a meeting, or you're at a party, or an event, and there's lots of conversations going on. So you're gonna drop into these 4 categories. I will leave the flow link profile below. So please review your flow type and comment below. By which type are you? Thank you for watching. Please don't forget